Let's pay attention to this interview with Eugene and Odile Intezarayo, who attended the 145th class of Gilead. What can we learn from their example of faith and endurance?
With us today, we have Eugene and Odile Intezarayo. They've graduated from the 145th class of Gilead, and they lived through this mayhem. Odile, now your family is Tutsi. Now this must have certainly put them in danger.
The killing was happening all over the country, so my parents and my brother were killed. I saw that some religious leaders were involved in killing people in genocide. I couldn't believe how people who were previously living together friendly, now they start killing their neighbors.
How did you get contact with the truth?
So after the genocide, I was taken by my aunt, whose family were Jehovah's Witnesses. So I began studying the Bible with them. I was in a Live Forever book. I saw a picture of a priest blessing people in the church, and then he was blessing troops who were going to kill. But also I could see how brothers and sisters in the congregation, with love and courage, risked their life to take care of one another.
Oh, that's touching. What has helped you to not become a bitter person?
The preaching work is very important to me because the more I talk about the Bible promises, they become real to me. For example, when I talk about the resurrection hope, the condition of the dead, this helped me to feel that my loved ones are not suffering anymore and they are waiting to be resurrected. So this makes me feel happy.
So this comes out of left field in the April JW Broadcasting episode. We're hearing here from a couple who have graduated Gilead, Eugene and Odile, talking about their experience of the Rwandan genocide. I don't know, it just feels very distasteful to be exploiting this horrific tragedy, this catastrophe in which so many people died under the most brutal circumstances, exploiting this atrocity for religious leverage to promote the Jehovah's Witness religion. That's what we're seeing here. Odile wasn't a Jehovah's Witness when this happened. She became a Jehovah's Witness later and learned that Jehovah's Witnesses protected one another during the genocide. I don't doubt that that happened, by the way. But what she's relating here, in terms of at least the message that the organization wants people to take away, namely that Jehovah's Witnesses were fabulous and Jehovah's Witnesses looked after each other, what she's relating, she's not relating firsthand. That part of the story is what was told her when she was being recruited into the Jehovah's Witness religion. The part of her story that is firsthand is the fact that she no longer has parents and she no longer has a brother because this thing happened. And in the face of this unimaginable loss, I mean, imagine losing simultaneously both of your parents and your brother, and not due to some disease or something, but in the most brutal way, people going door to door with machetes. I mean, this is just unfathomable violence and carnage. And Jehovah's Witnesses sail along and say, oh, don't worry, we've got the solution here. Follow us and you'll see them again. That is exploitation of the most grotesque kind. And the way they're showing this story, the way they are capitalizing on this grief for propaganda value is despicable.
Now, Eugene, your family was not a direct target of the violence, but what other hardships did you face?
The economic situation was very difficult. My family had no money, and they could not buy food. I remember my mom, I can still see her lying on the bed in complete despair, not knowing what she can do for us children. The elders asked me to go to the Kingdom Hall, and when I arrived, they handed me 18,000 Rwandan francs. The elders told me that my brothers and sisters from abroad offered us this gift. So I immediately ran back home, found my mom still lying on the bed. I gave her the money. I can still see my mom crying because of the joy and thankfulness of what the brothers had done.
Excellent.
Excellent, that, isn't it, Eugene? You got some money. Your wife, sitting next to you, lost her parents and her brother, and you got some money. You got 10,000 Rwandan francs, and everyone lived happily ever after. Because isn't it an amazing worldwide organization? Isn't it incredible that Jehovah's Witnesses only look after their own when there's an atrocity and when there's a tragedy? Odile wasn't a Jehovah's Witness when it happened. She didn't get any money, did she? How could she have got any money? Because she wasn't a Jehovah's Witness yet. But you were a Jehovah's Witness. You didn't lose anyone, and you got some money. Wow. If God is involved in this in any way, shape, or form, what does it say about God? That he let your wife's parents and brother die, but you and your family, your hardship was not having money, and you got some money. Viewers, I've spoken about this before, this whole Jehovah's Hand thing. I just find it so distasteful in situations not involving barbaric and brutal loss of life, but especially in the context of the Rwandan Genocide. How can they possibly string all this together and expect everyone to love the organization because of this? That's what this is about. Our organization is the best. The churches of Christendom are the worst because they were involved in the genocide. If you think about it, this is the narrative. This is the spin that they're putting on this. Most people, when they look at a tragedy or an atrocity like the Rwandan Genocide, they feel compassion and they feel sympathy. And they ask, how can we make sure this doesn't happen again? What can we do practically on the ground in Rwanda? How can we help communities so that there can never again be a situation where one man turns on another man, where neighbors who were previously friends had nothing but affection for each other, where all of a sudden they feel as though they've got to kill each other because that's what their tribe requires them to do. How can we stop this from happening in the future? What political efforts can we get behind? What initiatives, what community initiatives can we introduce to make this less likely in the future? Jehovah's Witnesses look at this and think, how can we spin this to our advantage? Oh, brilliant. There's a couple from Rwanda in this Gilead class. We'll stick them on camera in this glossy interview segment. They even give it a name, by the way, as we're going to see. They seem to think of this as an actual show that they're doing. And we're going to find a way of spinning this whole story to drive home the message that religions outside of Jehovah's Witnesses are deplorable and they are involved in this sort of thing, whereas Jehovah's Witnesses are the good guys, and Jehovah's Witnesses will at least give you money if this sort of thing happens and you're one of us. That's the message here. And I quite frankly found it very distasteful as well that Odile was the one with the story, but they had to interview them together, even though Eugene's experience of the genocide was completely different and nowhere near as tragic. His hardship was monetary, whereas his wife lost both of her parents and her brother. But because he's the man, because he's the spiritual head, we have to interview both of them. We can't just interview Odile and hear her story. We've got to have her husband next to her giving his version, even though his loss was nowhere near the loss of Odile. I found that distasteful as well, and an indication of just how male-centric this organization is.
They needed that fresh application of this very commandment of Jesus, like loving one another to the point of risking our lives for our brothers. Being here in Gilead has reminded me of that fact, that I really need to love my brothers and sisters as Jesus loved us.
You brothers and sisters in Rwanda have given us a wonderful example of courage and faith and love. Please know we love you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on this edition of Extraordinary Experiences.
Yes, this has to be my all-time favorite edition of Extraordinary Experiences, that well-known talk show that we're all familiar with. You know, there's a long line of editions that readily spring to mind when I'm thinking of interviewing excellence. Good grief. Yeah, like we've all heard of your show that you've literally just made up and are now trying to promote as though it's this new thing that everyone's watching. Oh. And then they say as well,
you brothers and sisters in Rwanda have given us a wonderful example of courage and faith and love.
These two Gilead graduates have given a wonderful example of courage and faith and love. He was young during the genocide, and his family weren't affected by the violence. They were affected by financial hardship, and they received money. That was his story. Courage, faith, and love. His story doesn't in any way involve coming to the rescue of other brothers and sisters. His story was simply about receiving aid. That was his story. And his wife's story, which was infinitely more interesting, and frankly, he was clearly only there because he's a man, and how can we possibly have Odile appear on camera without her husband by her side? Her story involved her mother and father and brother dying when she wasn't even a Jehovah's Witness. Courage, faith, and love, apparently, is what her story shows, even though she wasn't a witness during the genocide. She just became one later. Once she no longer had her parents, by the way. She no longer had her parents to stop her from being exploited by a cult, which is what ended up happening. And by being exploited by a cult, by getting roped in due to her aunt, who had Jehovah's Witness family, apparently that was her showing courage, faith, and love. They are just clueless, aren't they, when it comes to dealing with these genuine stories of tragedy. They get so caught up and so preoccupied in thinking, how can we spin this? How can we use this story from Rwanda to show courage, faith, and love? That's our message. Courage, faith, and love. That's our neat little motto that we'll put at the end. That they get so preoccupied with the spin that they don't stop to think for a moment whether their spin actually applies to the story that we've heard. the spin becomes more important than the story itself, to the point where it doesn't actually matter whether the spin applies to the story. It's literally just a case of, oh, Rwanda, these two people who've come to study in the Gilead course, they're from Rwanda. Oh, one of them lost family members due to the genocide. Let's interview them and get the heart-tugging story, even if the story itself tells us nothing about the organization beyond, oh, the guy got some money. We're still going to try to exploit and leverage this story to try and use this grief and use this pain and use this immense loss to persuade people that ours is the best organization.